Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Non-Toxic Environments Podcast. My name is Andy Pace. I am your host. This is another special week for us. It's very exciting whenever I get to talk to somebody who is part of the industry and not just a supplier or a subcontractor, but somebody who actually is building healthy homes and as somebody who I consider a peer. And I love talking with folks who are actually in the trenches doing the work. And our guest today is perfect. Christine Cimabue is actually the host of a podcast called the Holistic Homes Podcast, but she's also a licensed contractor and she's built healthy homes. She offers a lot of information on her podcast and her Instagram page. She has a number of programs that you can uh, subscribe to help you on your journey or in your journey of designing and building your own healthy home. And so I'm very excited to bring Christine in on here on the show to talk to us today. And so here's Christine. Christine, it's so good to have you here on the Non-Toxic Environments Podcast. It's been a while. You and I did a Instagram Live deal a couple of months ago on your platform, and I enjoyed it so much that I had to have you on my show. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great live. I love that we're able to just kind of chit chat about healthy homes because it's the way it should be, just conversational and talk through it all.
You bring up a good point. There's so many people in our industry that are so secretive of how they want to do things. And I find that, your all of your platforms that you talk on and your programs are so informative, informational, and you're willing to help and willing to share. And I do believe this is the way we should be instead of keeping it all for ourselves and it's that way nobody finds out.
Yeah, and I think healthy homes are a basic human need. Like it shouldn't be so coveted and feel like it is a completely separate industry of standard home building. Currently, that is the way that it is, but
Right.
any little nuggets or helpful tips along the way that somebody can use, I think has value.
100%. Very well said. So I want to start this off kind of way back. What what prompted you to become a builder in the first place? Not just a healthy home builder or a healthy home expert, but what made you decide to become a builder? Because, those of us in this industry, it's kind of a calling, right? And you just feel like you need to be in it. And so I'm kind of curious to hear your story.
Yeah. Well, my background is in interior design and I quickly transitioned straight into construction because I'm a very type A person. It's either right or wrong. It's not if I like a throw pillow or not. So I quickly went into construction, worked under many other contractors, saw a lot of red flags, couldn't quite put the pieces together because a lot of contractors were doing things just their own way. And it wasn't until probably over 10 or 12 years ago now, I purchased my very first home. It was in my 20s. This was going to be an investment property for me. Already having a background in construction, I knew we wanted to go in, we wanted to upgrade it, make it look beautiful. And I was so excited about the project. I had what I thought was the great team to help me, have a successful project. I had the realtor, I had the home inspection, got the keys, and we went to demo the kitchen the following day. And I get a call that all work had to stop because the entire kitchen behind the cabinetry, floor to ceiling, covered in black, pink, the worst mold still that I've ever seen. And I was alone. I was by myself. I was single at the time. My realtor, nothing short of just abandoned me. My home inspector, same thing. Everyone was just hands off. So I have this, what felt like a very big investment that I couldn't move forward in. And I knew I wasn't the only one feeling that way at some point in time. And I wanted to change that. So long story short, this home, it was an existing home, probably built in the 60s. There was a second level drain line that it was cast iron, original to the home. It had a crack in it. And every time the shower was used, it was just spewing water behind this kitchen wall. Nothing was visible. Nothing was visible. Nothing came up in the home inspection. What did come up was a little bit of mold under the kitchen sink. And so my response was, okay, great. Well, Mr. Seller, go ahead and correct that mold under the kitchen sink. Turns out the way they corrected it was they painted over it. So that was kind of my only little saving grace there, is that it wasn't properly remediated. So in the end, I was able to have proper remediation, but the whole process was very scary. And I never wanted myself or anyone else to experience that. So I decided to take my construction knowledge, pair it with my desire for healthy living, and become a holistic contractor.
Wow. That's a scary story. And it's a story that I've heard, not becoming a contractor, but it's a story I've heard about people buying these homes and thinking they got, their home of their dreams, what have you. Turns out that somebody along the way missed something, missed a detail, and all of a sudden the whole house is full of mold. I'm dealing with right now with a client in South Carolina. Actually, I've had many clients in South Carolina dealing with this because of their building practices there. But I mean, that brings up a whole host of questions about inspections, who to trust. But honestly, one of the things you said in that description was you put your team together, you assembled your team. And
Mm-hmm.
that really is crucial. I mean, in order to build a healthy home or remodel a healthy home, you really do have to have a team that you can trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And clients will come to me and say, all right, tell me everything I need to know. Well, truth is, do you want to become a builder overnight
Mhm.
and kind of use your home as your first go? No, and it shouldn't be a requirement or the onus on the homeowner to become so knowledgeable in home building and how to build it healthy. That is exactly why you hire a team. You have an architect, you have a builder, you have a holistic contractor or a healthy home consultant. Lean on your team, and express your desires and your wish list, and it should be on your team to help see that through. So I think it's great to be educated in how your home is ultimately going to perform, but to know every nuanced detail of what makes a healthy home, I think it would be too much pressure to put on a homeowner or expectation.
It's a lot of pressure. The anxiety of going through either home building or home remodeling is already high.
Yeah.
And you're
And
dealing with people who have a depressed immune system, typically chronic inflammatory response, mast cell activation, chemical sensitivity, what have you. So anxiety level is high already. And then you throw into the mix the homeowner's supposed to know what the building code is for the community they're building in.
yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't.
Well,
It's a lot. It's a lot to take on. And we want to have some responsibility for the architect and the builder. That is why most of them are going to be licensed and educated, although not many homeowners know that there are some states and jurisdictions that do not require your contractor to be licensed. There's some jurisdictions that do not require building permits. That's something homeowners should be aware of.
for sure. I have a recent client that essentially wanted to hire me to redo the architectural drawings to put all the details on the drawings that should have been there in the first place that the architect's refusing to do. And 'cause for me, I come from the commercial building industry. In the commercial building industry, you've got a set of plans and a set of specifications. Those specifications are like the Dewey Decimal System of construction. If you are any trade, any supplier on the job, you know exactly where to find information of what you're going to provide and what you're going to install and how to do it. If it's not in the spec book, then it's on the detail. If it's none of the above, you have to get architectural approval to do what you're going to do. In the
Mhm.
residential industry, for the most part, it's the Wild West.
It is. And most people don't understand that your architectural set of plans are to satisfy building code requirements or local permit requirements. So oftentimes they are bare minimum details on a construction set of plans. Most of the time, I would say I see maybe about 10 details, maybe 10 or less.
Mhm.
A robust set of construction documents should have somewhere around 30 plus details. Reason being, not only is this good information to provide to the builder, but your construction documents are a contract. You're going to take that construction document set, hand it over to the builder, and they are going to build according to what's on those plans. If there's something missing, like a window flashing detail, well, you know what they're going to do? They're going to do what's required by bare minimum building code standards, or they're going to do what they've always done for the past 30 years that's never had an issue, da 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 da.
Uh-huh.
So protect yourself and have that conversation early on with your architect about what's included. Can you add additional details and make sure that your building plan set is including every single detail that you've desired, that you've talked through with your team, so that there's no gray area.
And I always say it's good to have the builder and the architect and the homeowner all sitting down at the table at the same time to discuss these things because there's a couple of local builders that I do a lot of work with, and I like working with them because when it comes to those details, the builder is going to say, all right, here's what best practice is, here's what we typically do, but I understand what you're trying to achieve here, and you know Mr. and Mrs. Architect, here's what I want you to put on the plans to make sure that all the trades involved understand the process. A good builder is going to be helpful in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
I work with too many builders, unfortunately, where I'm thrown into the mix and the builder says, "Oh yeah, we're just going to do what we always do," as you said. This is
Mm-hmm.
what we've done. We've done it for 30 years. My response is, I've been golfing for 30 years. I'm still horrible. Just because you do something and you get paid for it does not mean you're good at it nor an expert. And so
Mm-hmm.
um, there are the bare minimums, the codes, and those are just that, the bare minimums to meet the requirements. And then there are the better ways of doing things. And I think it does have to be a team effort. You have to have all three at the table at the same time. So we all understand, everybody all understands exactly the process. And as you say, if it's not on the drawings, then it typically is up to interpretation by whatever trade is involved. And
Mm-hmm.
they're going to do, hopefully, they'll do at least what's to code. Hopefully, they do at least to what the manufacturer recommends. For instance, window installation. You hope that the window installer or the window manufacturer says, here is how we want our windows installed in this situation for this wall assembly. You hope they follow those directions, but you have to trust that the trades are actually reading those directions and interpreting them properly. So it is a process. I don't want to make it sound so scary for a homeowner to go through. And you don't have to be a licensed contractor to do this, but you certainly have to be involved to make sure that everybody is reading off the same sheet of music.
Yeah. And you touched on something about, it feeling scary. I'm here after making the home building process enjoyable, taking the fear out of it. There should not have feel like this level of pressure that you have to be on the job site multiple hours a day overseeing these trades that are supposed to be skilled in doing the work right. So that's why, again, all of this should really be happening during that design stage with the architect. Get everything that you want, detail wise, material wise, construction details. All of that should be on the plans so that ideally during construction, it doesn't feel like your hair's on fire and it's like smooth sailing. Everyone knows what they're doing. There's no gray area. There should be, minimal to no change orders or, hey, that's going to cost you extra
Right.
because this has all been ironed out in the construction document stage.
That's a great point. The change order. If it's not talked about beforehand, if it's not detailed beforehand, inevitably it comes down to somebody saying, "Oh, we didn't know that's what you wanted. Now here's what's the cost to achieve that." If you were to make all of your decisions for your project, I'm even talking about choose your paint colors on the house before the first shovel gets stuck in the ground. Your house will ultimately cost as little as it can cost and take as little amount of time to build. But if you have to start making decisions during the process, that's what slows things down and increases the cost.
Yeah. And one big item that, if a client comes to me mid-construction, I have to be really honest and say, that's not the most successful way to build a healthy home, because there are certain items that you just cannot switch out mid-construction. And a big one is insulation.
Mm.
So the insulation, there's required R values, meaning, how thermally resistant that insulation is providing. And you can't always just swap it out. A big one that I see is, especially on the East Coast and cold and freezing climates, is they have very high R value requirement for attics.
Mm.
Typically, that's going to be achieved with something like a spray foam. Now, if you are one that does not want spray foam in your home, you cannot just swap that out mid-construction for something like a mineral wool bat. That's not going to achieve the code requirement for the R value. Well, all right, Christine, what do I do? Well, you can't do much mid-construction if it wasn't planned for in the architectural stage, because there are solutions to come up with a higher R value. Typically, that's a combination of outboard insulation and bats and a couple other layers, but you can't just do that mid-construction. You're going to have plan revisions. That's going to make your roof assembly completely different. So I hate when that happens, because I do hear often when a contractor says, you have no other choice but to use X.
Mm-hmm.
And if that doesn't align with what the homeowner wants, and they're paying hundreds of $1,000s for this custom built home, it can feel really frustrating.
Boy, you hit on something there. I can't tell you how many phone calls I've gotten from customers in mid-construction freaking out because they just learned
Yeah.
this is what's going to be done in their home and they wish they would have talked to me a week ago. And my response, unfortunately, is I've been at this for over 30 years. I've kind of gotten to the point where I don't hold a lot back. I try to be respectful, but I also say, I wish you would have talked to me last week too, because now there's nothing we can do. I would love to make their lives easier, but at some point you have to accept the fact that it's too late to make these revisions, unless you're looking at completely redoing framing,
Hmm.
and now it becomes uh, unobtainable because of the budgeting. And so, obviously, with shows like yours and mine, we're trying to educate the consumer prior to that project, to that part of the project. We want them to be asking these questions during the design and development stage and not after the job is underway. Unfortunately, we can't always get to people beforehand, and so we try to give them the assistance, but we also have to say to be realistic. Uh, there are certain things that we can do, certain things we can't. Understand that 90% of the toxicity issues inside of your home will come from the things you see and touch on a daily basis. The insulation is not that important when it comes to indoor air quality. However, for somebody who does have mast cell activation or chronic inflammatory response or extreme chemical sensitivity, we do have to be more concerned about whether they're using spray foam or mineral wool or other types of insulation. So I guess the moral of the story is get these questions answered beforehand, and make sure you have a team of people together that you can trust, that you can rely on. Um, this kind of brings up a question I wanted to talk to you about. You had a recent podcast, and I love your podcast, by the way. I think it's so informative.
Thank you.
You had a recent podcast episode on the legal ramifications of
Mm.
a healthy or an unhealthy home. Ooh, boy, this touches a lot for people because if I hear it, I hear this I probably 3 times a day from customers. we have an extreme mold problem, or we found out that we have extreme termite damage, or we have this or that, and the insurance companies want nothing to do with it. The contractors are holding, no liability for this. This is a real can of worms that I don't think really has been opened yet.
Yeah. And it doesn't have, we don't want to get to the point where we're in litigation with the builder or anyone. I don't think anybody is desiring that. It's just, again, the unknown of homeowners almost feeling like they have no rights. And it's quite the opposite if planned accordingly. Homeowners are arguably making the biggest investment ever into building or purchasing their home.
Hmm.
You've got to protect that in a much better way than just having a realtor and home inspection like I did. There's a lot more that goes into it. And if you are one that is doing like a custom new build, well, I wouldn't just take that contractor's contract and sign it. That is a good thing to send over to a mold literate or construction attorney to review your contract. Just like if you were entering into a contract with anyone else, you would have that reviewed and protected so that your investment is protected, your health is protected, and maybe there's amendments made or addendums added to protect you. One of the big ones is what happens if during the framing stage, moldy lumber is installed or structural framing that has water damage is installed. Who's responsible for that? Is that something that you're requiring the contractor to replace, remove, remediate? You've got to have that in writing somewhere. What your expectations are cannot just be a text message or a phone call. It needs to be documented, documented, documented to protect yourself and for the builder so that there's very clear lines of who's responsible for what and what your expectations are so that nobody's going through an unnecessary legal process.
Well, I see quite often on blueprints, and this is, I think, forced by the home builders associations, the trade associations, are telling the builders to put on the plans basically these caveats saying that, mold is everywhere. We can't control it. There's going to be mold on the wood, but essentially it's fine. It'll dry. The builders will say, for the most part, "Oh yeah, that's not a problem. I see there's mold there, but don't worry. Once the home is buttoned up and the drywall's up and it's all insulated, it'll go away." Obviously, that's like ancient mentality. What we've learned in the last 5 to 10 years about mold, it's making that information so completely obsolete. Once mold, yes, mold is everywhere, but mold never goes away on its own. It just goes dormant to be reactivated 20 years later because of a roof leak or a plumbing leak. So it does have to be dealt with. But I do see a real problem with the builders associations because they are pushing their members to essentially wipe their hands clean of any liability whatsoever for mold that may be in lumber.
And there's many things wrong with that, but I think the biggest one is that the mentality that the builder is doing you a favor by building you a home, and you should just let the
Mm.
builder do their job. No other investment are you making where you just hand your money over and let them do what they do. The builder has got to understand they are building a home for you. It does not matter what they've done for 30 years and never had a leak. It doesn't matter if lumberyard mold is no big deal. If that is a big deal to you, it needs to be in a contract and it needs to be respected. This is all stuff that should be talked through during the interview process of builders. Mr. Builder, have you ever built a healthy home before? Oh, yeah, we've built a home that had solar panels. Well, is that your definition of a healthy home? So emphasize what it is that is your hierarchy. Like, what is your number one priority when you say a healthy home? If you say it's water damage mitigation, okay, Mr. Builder, what do you do to prevent, moldy lumber from being installed in my home? Now, if they say, what do you mean? Lumberyard mold is harmless. Well, maybe that's a red flag that you may not want to use that builder. much better to find out way in advance than mid-construction. So vet the builder, make sure that you, the architect, everyone is on the same page of what the expectations are.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think that there's a lot that the industry kind of tries to get away with.
Mm.
And I'll say that because of COVID and because of people kind of locked in their homes and really more concerned about the health of the occupant before more now than ever, it's allowed people or given them permission to start asking more questions. And the industry just hasn't had a way to come up with good answers. I mean, sans folks like you and others in the industry who can talk about these things, but most of the builders just want to avoid it. And they look at this as being a problem customer. And you're
Yeah.
asking these questions, therefore you're going to be a problem. I'm going to add 30% to my bid so you don't take the job. But if you do hire us, we're making a lot more money at it.
Yeah, there's so much so much wrong with that. But again, that's usually exposed early on.
Mhm.
Um, I find most of the time a good way to have a contract set up with a contractor. There's many different bid styles. There's lump sum where they just give you, here it is, it's $500,000 and we're going to give you, X, Y, and Z. Or they'll give you like a line item bid where it's like bathroom this much, kitchen this much, da 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 da. Although I find that the most successful style contracts, this is not a blanket statement, but the most successful on both ends is a cost plus contract because then if you're wanting to upgrade the insulation or you're wanting to swap out lumber, whatever it is that you're desiring, it doesn't really negatively impact the contractor's bid because whatever you select, they're going to tack on 15, 20% to that total.
Right.
So there should be less of these unknown change orders or sometimes what people refer to as scope creep.
Mhm.
And it's just when everyone's happy on all sides, things go smoothly.
I like that. I think that is the best approach. I don't like when builders give budgets or allowances for certain things because that just it's nothing but ambiguity. And they say, oh, there's a budget in there for an allowance for $15,000 for flooring. Well, maybe you want to do a glue down natural linoleum and they were thinking LVP. So now we have to add a 1/4 inch underlay. And so, well, there was no money in there for that. It's just, let's just figure out exactly what you want in the home. And it's a cost plus makes it very, very simple, very easy to understand. And there is no trying to hide certain things.
Yeah. And a cost plus type of contract requires a whole lot of transparency on the builder side. They're giving you receipts and they're just adding a markup to that. So, not every builder is set up to operate in that way. But again, this is a good question to ask during that interview process.
Mhm. Very good. Now, I want to ask you one more thing about the legal issues of building, and kind of with a very very short story. Uh, your background being in interior design originally. In my career, I've guest lectured at just about every interior design school in the Midwest. And back in the 90s when green building, green design was all of the rage in early 2000s, one of the things I would talk about with these young design minds was understand that as the interior designer, somebody hires an architect, somebody hires a designer. I think that in a lot of cases, the interior designer is actually more influential with the built with the materials you surround yourself with because you hire a designer for their ability to achieve the style you're looking for. And, because good designers can envision in color and in 3D and interpret what you're telling them and then give it to you on this sample board and then in real life. And because of that, you really take to heart as a consumer. I think that it's much easier to say, well, Mr. Architect, I told you I didn't want a door in that location. I wanted it over there. But with a designer, you're like, perfect. That's exactly what I want. I'm going to trust what you're giving me. You Designers are really an integral part of the liability stream. because of the materials, the flooring materials, the countertops, the cabinetry, the paint finishes. And so I was encouraging them 25 years ago to really look at the materials that you're specifying. And I wonder, I'm just kind of getting to get your opinion on this, if you see that maybe there's an influence in the industry now with design, architecture, construction, where the professionals are actually thinking about that from a liability standpoint. Maybe we do need to look at healthier options.
Yes, yes, and but I see it being a lot more in depth and almost there's a gap between the design and the installation. There's not many designers that can kind of marry that together. A lot of times you kind of see designers will specify something and it's not like, well, we can't even install that structurally. We're going to have to beef things up if you want to put wall, stone cladding on this interior wall. Sometimes there can be a miss there.
Mhm.
So yes, definitely on selecting healthier building materials, but ideally that interior designer is going to have some knowledge of like proper installation as well. And that's where the big miss happens, especially with flooring. Flooring. Before anyone is purchasing any type of flooring, they should go and read those installation guidelines. It will tell you specifically, it will tell you your slab moisture content cannot exceed this. Your indoor humidity cannot exceed this. Your solid wood planks need to acclimate inside of the home, not inside the garage for 3 weeks. All of these things is going to detail everything so that you're not purchasing a beautiful flooring. It arrives to the job site and your particular home isn't even suitable for that type of flooring. So look at those installation guidelines. Gosh, I can't even tell you how many flooring installers don't even read those. Well, guess what? Your warranty's void. You have
Void.
zero
Yep.
warranty. So document, document, document. That's the biggest piece of advice in construction. Document the moisture content reading of the slab. Maybe you're doing a calcium chloride test on your slab. Document that. Take a
Mhm.
moisture reading of the planks. Document that. Because if you have an issue with your flooring and you need to lean on that warranty, they're going to ask you for all of that information.
These are topics that I talk about all the time with clients, and they bring it up to their contractors, and the contractors act as if they're it's the first time anybody's ever asked them about this information,
Yes.
which floors me. This is if you look at like the National Hardwood Flooring Association, their guidelines on how to install hardwood flooring is you are doing moisture readings of the substrate, you are doing moisture readings of the new material, you're doing humidity checks,
Mm-hmm.
temperature checks, and you have to actually document that usually once, if not twice a day.
Yes.
You have to have the HVAC system running in operation. You
Mm-hmm.
have to have, if it's in-floor heat, you have to have the in-floor heat on for at least 2 weeks prior. But
Yeah.
then, if they do none of this and there's a problem on the job, you know what they do? They say, "Well, it's that whatever material you wanted, you bought it, or you
Mm-hmm.
you asked for this. It must have been a faulty material."
Yeah. You're the one that wanted healthy flooring.
Right?
No, no. Protect yourself, protect your home. Again, interviewing the installer, documenting this in writing. This, if you're going to meet on the job site and have this conversation, somebody is sending an email immediately after confirming, all right, materials arriving this day, it's expected, it's going to acclimate in the home for X amount of days. You confirmed you're taking moisture readings and documenting it, da 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 da. Put it in writing. This is a really big investment, flooring. It's going everywhere in your home. So, and if it ultimately is determined, oh, hey, we can't get the moisture content down, sometimes it's like 13%, 12%. Every floor is going to have a different requirement. And if it's determined, hey, we can't get the slab below 15%, how great is it to know that now than in 5 years or less when there's been mold growth underneath your flooring because moisture's been trapped? So it's only a good thing to do these proper protocol steps.
Boy, agreed. And the scary thing is that most contractors that our customers are working with really push back at this. They just assume that, my customer is being that quote unquote Karen that's just trying to micromanage the project. This is a huge investment, the largest investment of your life
Yeah.
in most people's situations. And it's not only investment of time and money, but it's also their health. And they're trying to build a healthy home because of current health issues or trying to, ward those health issues off for the future. And the contractors are acting as if, oh, come on, you're just being a problem. No, it's not being a problem. I just want to make sure it's done correctly and that all warranties are still valid. And so that's why it's so important to work with somebody like you who understands the industry. You speak the language. And that's one of the things that there's a problem between homeowners and builders. There's a huge language gap. It's like somebody speaking English and somebody else speaking Japanese. And
That's intentional. That's intentional
yes,
most of the time,
yes,
is for, unfortunately, some builders will gaslight or make homeowners feel like you don't know what you're talking about. I'm a builder. Just let me do my job.
right.
No, that's why it goes back to that architectural stage. You've got to know how your home is functioning.
Yeah,
You got to know what red flags to be looking for. How many times, right, you hear of your client calling you like, I don't know, Andy, like this just doesn't look right, but I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't even know what to say. You don't want to feel alone, and you should absolutely be speaking up. And your contractor should be taking a moment to say, well, hey, okay, well, we haven't done this step yet. So that's why it's looking like this. Yeah, there's this gap around the windows, but that actually gets sealed with like backer rod and caulk. So da da da. They should be explaining and taking the time to just calm your fears if something's not looking right to them.
right. I have a recent client who started questioning some of the wall assembly components and essentially just wanted to make sure that the way the wall is going to be built, it'll alleviate mold issues. The contractor said we're going to build it according to building code and sent her a copy of the International Building Code, the manual, the entire manual, and said, look it up.
Mm,
And so she brought this to my attention, and my response back was, it's his job and the architect's job to interpret the code properly, so they should come back to you with the proper detail and not leave it up to you to make sure that they've done it correctly.
yeah.
But this is kind of what we're dealing with in the industry right now. When it was just green building back 25 years ago, when it was just solar panels and geothermal systems and energy efficiency issues, it was all the builders adopted it because it was the up and coming thing. It was a motivator for sale, and I think um, the environment can't sue. The environment doesn't have a response to you.
Yeah.
Now that it's healthy homes and people saying, energy efficiency is great, but I don't want to live in a toxic box. Now builders are starting to push back a bit because they realize that homeowners in a lot of situations know more than they do.
Right. And there's a lot of layers to this. Definitely building codes have improved. Homes are more structurally sound. That's a great thing. Energy efficiency. These are great things. I can't save the environment if I'm sick. So there's really no building codes out there that place occupant health as the number one priority. And there's a big issue with that. And you can just see that in the litigation system. There's a statistic that 70% of contractor litigation has to do with water damage.
Mm,
Now, why contractors don't want to change that, or, are kind of putting up this big huff and a puff about homeowners that are wanting watertight homes is beyond me. Like, a contractor should want to be taking those extra steps, should want to be doing leak tests on windows
mhm,
when they're installed so that the issue's corrected then and they don't end up in litigation in
right.
5 or 10 years when that leaky window has now caused water damage and mold in their home. correct it then. And the contractor should be on board and willing to do that.
Should be. I think a lot of them just are kind of crossing their fingers and waiting for the 1 year, 2 year sort of blanket warranty to run out so they can finally
Mhm.
say, "Oh, good. Okay. I'm not going to be liable for anything anymore."
No, they're wrong
Yeah, right.
because they may think that, but there's a lot of wonderful mold attorneys that are helping families, seek retribution. And the other big piece to this, I think we've kind of bashed on some builders because there's some bad apples, definitely, but a lot of issues that are arising after 5, 10, 20 years, it's not always negligence.
Right.
That's not always the case. It's just that there are not enough code requirements or standards that are leak testing and putting safeguards in place, access panels around any, shower valve or plumbing connection.
Right.
These things are not a part of the building code yet. So they're just not done. But your builder and everyone on your team should be over the moon excited about having these checks and balances and safeguards in place because we've done our due diligence. We've leak tested the building assembly before the insulation and drywall's gone up. So we all know we've got this third party testing. Nothing's leaking. And if it is, how great is it to correct it then than before everything is closed up and you don't have any eyeballs behind your wall?
Right. Now you're based in California, correct? But you do work all over the country.
Yes, I'm a licensed contractor here in California. I'm based in Southern California, and I've done a lot of investments. We were doing a lot of renovations because here in Southern California, we're pretty much built out to the rim here. So we began doing that, but I can only make a difference of like one or two homes at a time. So that's when I transitioned into more consulting, and it has been surprisingly quite successful and well received on the architect and builder side of things. Sometimes there's this stereotype of, oh, you're going to get so much pushback. How do we even get the builder on board with this X, Y, and Z, da, da, da. And they're receptive to it. The right builder is receptive to it. They either want to learn, they want to do it right, they want to, do whatever the homeowner wants. Just tell me what to do, Mr. or Mrs. Homeowner, and I'll do it. And they're receptive to having maybe building envelope testing or leak testing. They want to have these things in place to protect them as well.
Well, good. That was what I was going to ask you that. How is the reception around the
Yeah.
country? Because of course you hear this too. There are certain pockets of the country, doesn't really matter where, but there's certain pockets where they just don't, they're slow to adapt to some of the newer ideas and technologies. Other parts of the country are jumping on the bandwagon very fast. But it's good to see that, you know, I don't get tons of pushback all over the place. It's starting to become a smaller and smaller area of pushback.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I see that as well. There's less pushback. And I think it also has to do with probably how Andy, you and I are communicating. Like, I'm very upfront that I'm not a bulldozer. I'm not coming in to wreck everyone's plan. We're reinventing the wheel here. We're going to, build a house out of straw. No,
Right.
we are here. This should feel like a collaboration from day one. And we start with, hey, all right, you're living in Florida, so you're gonna do CMU walls. All right, let's work with that.
Mhm.
Here's how we can make that more robust. And same thing with, all right, you're going to be building in a hot, humid climate down in Texas. Well, we got to have a pretty airtight building envelope there and really prevent the humidity from coming in. So it has got to be climate specific, budget specific, what the homeowner is expecting out of this home. It's not always water damage mitigation is number one. There are clients who you probably have as well, where they want to avoid EMFs at all costs. That's number
Mhm.
one. Maybe number two is water damage. The overall theme here is that home building should no longer be these cookie cutter production homes and just go ahead and move in. You are building a home that suits your family, your needs, your expectations. And I just really dislike production builds.
Yeah, right. Well,
Yeah.
and I love what you said too about Um, it doesn't have to be, straw walls. I've used that in my career. It's like, back in the 90s, in order to be a green home, it was, straw bale or cob building with rammed earth floors, and that was really considered green at the time, which
Hmm.
from a environmental standpoint, sure, it is. But realistically speaking, anybody who wants to build a new home is not going to be able to get a mortgage for a home like that. No mortgage lender is
Yeah.
going to give you a loan for that. And I used to recommend insulated concrete form all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's expensive. A lot of lenders don't like to give you the value for that. Not many builders know how to work with it. And so I've adapted my practice over the years to say, listen, we build traditionally stick frame homes.
Yeah.
How can I make these homes as healthy as possible and be affordable, obtainable? Of course, there are certain situations where certain clients we have to go with something specialized because of their individual situation. This
Hmm.
is why I've found it very difficult over the years to like author a book on how to build a healthy home because it
Yeah.
changes. It'll change before the book gets published, and it changes based upon the individual client. And you can't give you have to give people choices based upon what they're dealing with in their climate with their specific health issues and their budget.
Yeah. And good, clean, dry building materials perform really well.
Right.
So when I get questions about, should I encapsulate all of the framing? Should I, should I do a barn dominium with steel? Should I, come up with X, Y, and Z? Well, no, not necessarily. And I get this question about what's the best waterproofing for a shower? And my response is always the same. Start with the installer, start with the builder. Who you've selected
Right.
to install it, go to them and ask them, what have you been using? What do you use that's tried and true? They're going to talk all this wonderful stuff about how it's never leaked. They've never had a shower leak. Okay, great. So what is that? What is that? And they may respond with something like Red Garden Hot Mop, very traditional building materials.
Yep.
Okay, well, if they have not used anything else at all and you don't want hot mop, which is liquid asphalt, in your home, we're not going to let this builder use you as a guinea pig to try something new.
Right.
So maybe consider using a different subcontractor, look at other, building materials that could be used, but always start with what they typically do and see how we can build up from there. See how can we add like 3 or 4 layers of red guard
Mhm.
to the walls? Can we use something else for the shower pan? And so, people want to start building showers with, I really want to use Schluter or I really want to use Weedy, whatever it is. Well, if your installers never used that before, Schluter is a great material.
Mhm.
Schluter is the worst material you can use if the installers never installed it. So
Exactly.
don't be a guinea pig
Mhm.
and just try to, again, collaborate with who you have building your home, see how you can make things better.
Excellent advice. Really excellent advice right there. So we have a few minutes left. I want to let everybody know what is the best way for them to reach out to you and to be able to work with you.
Mhm. So I think really the most successful healthy homes start early on. I've had clients reach out to me way before they even purchase land, and that's great too. Ideally, it is in those early stages, collaborating with the architect and the builder. And it's always good to have the conversation first. I like to always ask, have you talked to your architect and builder about your desire to build a healthy home? And if the answer is no, like that needs to be a conversation, because it needs to be a collaboration. And if your architect builder said, no, I don't need any of that nonsense, is that an appropriate response? Is that something that you're okay with? So yes, earlier the better, because again, mid-construction, there's very little that we can do to make a significant impact in the health of the home. So should be a collaboration early on. Ideally, we're working together for at least a minimum of 6 months, ironing out all of those details. So construction implementation is smooth sailing. Um, but I know not everyone is doing a custom new build or like an extensive gut renovation. Ideally, that would be the case. But maybe you're doing like a shower remodel or something smaller. So I do try to have, options. I have a bathroom course. I twice a year run like an extensive 8 week kind of, we're going to give you all the information and get all your questions ironed out. So I have a couple of options of ways that people can work with me. Definitely checking out my Instagram at Holistic Homes by Christine. I've got everything listed in there. But ultimately, I think you and Andy we're on the same page. We want people to have access to healthy homes.
Right.
And that's going to mean something different for everyone. For some people, it's just, I want to remodel my bathroom to be healthy. Others are like, we're building from the ground up. So there is definitely this spectrum here to what makes a healthy home. And I think we just want to provide some great resources to make that tangible for everyone.
Excellent. And folks, I'll put all the notes, all the contact information and socials in the notes. So please reach out to Christine. I have to tell you, it is so refreshing to talk to somebody who's in our industry that I mean, I feel you and I are really on the same page with just about
Yeah.
everything. And I love your common sense approach. I think maybe I've been in the industry a little longer and probably have
Hmm.
a bit more cynicism. So I appreciate the fact that you kind of tame that, tame my cynicism a bit. But you have a great outlook on this. And folks, if you haven't gone to Christine's Instagram page already, go now and then sign up for one of her courses. You will not be disappointed. Christine, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. This was great.
Excellent. Well, I hope to talk to you soon again.
Yeah. Yeah, we
All
will.
right.